I'm Evie Lucas and you're listening to Origin Archives, recorded on the lands of the Kaurna people. I acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples as the first Australians and traditional custodians of the lands where we research our ancestral lineage. Origin Archives is a place to keep a record of our lives, uncover our histories, tell our stories and unfold our futures. It's a recorded time capsule of our reality as we experience it and share any valuable information that we can to help others along their journey. The podcast discusses personal views and lived experiences of donor-conceived people and those seeking genealogical answers. At times it may include adult themes. Listener discretion is advised. In this episode of Origin Archives, I speak to Ross Hunter, a donor-conceived person from Melbourne, but someone who has lived in different parts of Australia and parts of the world. Ross had been a big part of my own personal experience moving from a small town and small city to Melbourne and joining what I know now as quite a large donor-conceived community, which at the time had a thriving support system that seems to be quite unique in the donor conception space. Ross had facilitated meetings as part of that support system, but had also been part of talks for the Donor Conception Organisation and also part of the documentary called Sperm Donors Anonymous. Hi, Ross Hunter. Thank you for joining me as part of this podcast. How are you doing?
Quite well, thank you. Great to be here.
I just really wanted to have a chat to you as part of starting this Origin Archives sort of thing as a place to put all of these records of donor conception in Australia and the history and the events and things that have already happened, especially in Victoria, which had been like a leader in terms of the states for so long, and just your experiences and maybe things you've learnt or found along the way since I met you. I think I met you in, it was like 2013 or 14. Yeah.
It's the roaring 20s again. Gosh. Yeah.
So I guess at the beginning, if anyone doesn't know you, maybe you could start with your story and how you found out you were donor conceived.
That's a good point. And just before I do, I really wanted to just hone in on that idea of archiving these things, because that's been a big issue for the donor conceived community over the years, because we've been so grassroots and fledgling, and we've often just lost some of the bread trails that people have created in the past. And I think it's really valuable that we do that. And I'm not going to go into naming the many brave and tireless individuals who have made a lot of progress in our movement. But yeah, I thought that was a really good point to start with, because we need the archive. And I think even with my journey, just even when I got my first sheet of non-identifying information, just the idea that something existed on paper around this process that was so secretive was really valuable to me. So yeah, little segue before the segue. So I'm Ross Hunter, and I am in my late 40s now. I'm not wanting to focus on numbers so much anymore. I discovered I was donor conceived at 33. Before that, lived a pretty happy, blissfully ignorant life. We're all ignorant in our own ways, I suppose. And yeah, didn't particularly suspect anything was awry, but I married a woman who's a really good detective, and so questions started to emerge, and it made sense with some of the cognitive dissonance that I had about the way that I was in comparison to members of my family. So yeah, the journey began over 15 years ago now, so it's been a long time. I'm a secondary teacher in the ACT at the moment, been teaching for about 14 or 15 years, done lots of different things in the past, and I think discovering I was donor conceived was really huge for me, just in terms of trying to get a bit of a sense of what stock I come from. That's not a great term necessarily, but just in terms of my interests and all my divergent proclivities, I suppose I just wanted to hone down maybe where some of these things come from, and it sort of made sense, some of them anyway, in terms of ethnicity and profession of my Dr. Frankenstein. Not my Dr. Frankenstein, but that was my mother's facilitator. But yeah, anyway, I've got to try and get the terminology right. Does that say anything about me? That gives you maybe a little sense of who I am. But it's there are layers of our identity.
You didn't know growing up that you were
No.
donor conceived?
No, it wasn't until Dad had a terminal illness that Mum decided to reveal how I came about. And so, yeah, that was a real sense of relief for me. I think Mum was worried that, I mean, certainly there are feelings of betrayal and why did the secrecy exist? And I suppose I was really disappointed for Dad that he couldn't feel comfortable with telling us that we were conceived that way. But it's yeah, I was relieved in the sense that it just made a lot of sense why there were so many differences, and gave me, I suppose, changed or raised the horizons in terms of trying to find out more information about myself and try and find out who my biological father is or was.
Right.
Yeah.
And I had met you through the VADA meetup groups. They were, was it wasn't every 3 months? Felt
Yeah, it was
closer than
about
that,
that.
but
That checks out. So yeah, Vanish and Vata had an agreement. So Victorian Adoption Network for Information and Self-Help, not to be confused with the very potent laundry cleaner. So it was on their premises. I remember the first one was in Franklin Street, and then it moved to North Melbourne. And yeah, I had some great meetings there. Yeah, that was where we met all those years ago in North Melbourne, and
yeah.
they were great groups. And I felt like a pig in mud or a duck in water or whatever analogy you'd like to use, just being around people, and I would just soak it up. It was so great to be around people that had a bit of an understanding of the experiences of finding this information out, and also just listening to all the stories and how difficult as well as positive some of them were. So it sort of situated you in this new community, and I just really enjoyed every moment of those, and went to everyone for many, many years,
Yeah.
except if I was interstate or overseas, as happens sometimes. But yeah, they weren't to be missed.
And because you ended up being like a facilitator at them as well. At what point did you sort of feel like you wanted to step in and do a bit more?
I think as Vata's relationship to the group kind of withdrew, it became necessary for people within the group to step up. Um, and Kate Bourne was a fantastic facilitator in that space. But as the funding structures and the kind of, and I mean, some people were somewhat concerned about the presence of a group that's ostensibly supporting reproductive rights and not so much cognizant of the spawn that are created like us. That was a somewhat conflict of interest there, but I think it was done very professionally by the people who were there. But inevitably, it became necessary for people within the community to step up. And I don't have any formal therapeutic training in that, but I've worked as a mediator before, and I think I just like to listen to people. So it seemed a natural step for me to do that. And then I had help from other people in the community. Shout out to Jackie. She was fantastic. And yeah, so that was a great experience. And it was just so great to hear people's stories. I think we're narrative creatures. And so when you're hearing, these parallels as well as the many differences, because there's so many different constellations and reasons why people ended up in this position or the decisions their parents made. So yeah, it was great. And really grateful for that experience. I did kind of hit the wall about 2 years ago where I didn't have the wherewithal to do it anymore, but it was, there were others who were able to step into that space, and I'm sure there are others out there.
Yeah. Can feel like a bit of a relay race, I feel like you pass the baton on and you might get it back for something and then give it away and go, "Oh, can't do any more of this at the moment," and give it away. And
Yeah.
I think that's so fair that happens. You've got to be able to go live your life and have some normalcy. I think normalcy I feel like I cherish normalcy, any kind of it, so much more, especially now. I do have to note that you're the person that came up with League of Extraordinary Gametes.
Yes.
Phrase. Do you remember when you started saying that? I feel like that was at a VADA meeting.
I think, it probably was. It was in the lead up maybe to the conference that Lauren Burns organised back in the day. It sort of stood out. One of my favourite podcasts about movies, What Went Wrong, their latest one is about the League of Extraordinary Gametes. I was just reminded of Gentlemen. But yeah, I think, it was long after that remake it was a much hated film, but the story behind the story is always as interesting, sometimes more interesting. But yeah, it just stood out when I saw some of the people in our group and how many talented and interesting people there were. And, you know, I don't want the non-DC community to think we're claiming superiority, but I think it's something to do with the highly unlikely scenario that our donors and our mothers in my case during the era that I was conceived, but they would never have met in any natural or bred in any natural circumstances. So I think that accounts for some of the quirkiness. But I think it was just something playful around that. It wasn't meant to, suggest any superiority, but it was just something.
No, it felt very playful.
Funny to talk about, really.
Yeah. Yeah. It was like more of an outside the box instead of a test tube related joke. It was like something, Yeah, because there were many of them. And so you mentioned the national conference in 2015. Were you part of helping Lauren Burns to make that happen or get ready for it? Because you spoke at the event.
I was living in Timor-Leste at the time, so I wasn't able to be involved, but I came back for it because I knew it was going to be an important moment in our movement.
Yeah.
And yeah, Lauren was a tour de force in organising that. And yeah, we're very grateful for that. It really started something. I remember Damien's presentation there, and we had a Chief Justice as well. So it was great to. I should be able to remember his name, but it's eluding me at the moment. But,
yes, I was tearing my office apart before because I know I still have somewhere in this room the schedule for the day.
Yeah,
and I remember his little tie. The Chief Justice, he had little like lions on his tie. He was as tall as me.
Great attention to detail.
But I don't know if you knew then, and I still owe you a dinner because you shouted me dinner that night because I was a little student, like took the train and so grateful, like a little student not able to afford much and didn't afford, was like, oh, okay, I have to buy a DNA test now that Damien's really convinced me to DNA test. And you'd bought me dinner that night, and I'll fight you to try and pay, because when I saw you for a coffee, you wouldn't let me pay that time too, I think. So one day I'll do it.
Maybe.
But that day, did you know, I've spoken about it a little bit elsewhere, but I don't know if you knew that the sister that I found was in that room that day.
Oh, wow. No, I hadn't thought about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was very strange to have so many of us in a room, and then I didn't really think that unknown siblings could be in that room and meet up. And but I didn't find the schedule for the day, but I found this. So this is, do you remember, if I read this to you, will you remember how it goes? Is that all right to read it to you?
Yeah, sure.
I just found it, half an hour ago. It says, DC Mantra by Ross Hunter, donor code S2. I stand here as a product. I stand here as a product of science. I stand here as a product. I stand here as a product of lies. I stand here as a product. I stand here as a product of love.
Wow.
What do you think about that now? Like, because we're
I think
11 years on.
I think it encapsulates the paradox of the situation, because certainly that was my parents' deep desire. And my mum's passed away recently, and going through some of her files, she was quite archivist with the theme of the show. You could see the earnest desire that they wanted to show love to a child. And it's easy to be a revisionist and look back and say that it was misguided, but every generation's going to be guilty of similar things, I think. So I do think so. I think between lies and love and science, that the truth is there. Yeah, I think when you see it written, it's quite, I really forgot that I wrote that. So there we go. I think it carries something. I don't know if it was my greatest poetry, but it's not bad. Apologies.
You were part of also the song with Michael Griffiths as well.
Yeah. I don't look at things that I've done. I just have this kind of, is that what I sound like? Yeah, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And we were chatting before about something else that I was in where I had a moustache and a different haircut and different glasses and
Yes.
everything.
In Sperm Donors Anonymous, you have a great moustache. So
Yes. Yeah, my
if
wife
looking
would
up that
debate
doco
that.
and watching it just for your quality moustache, people should go and watch it. So
No.
Sperm Donors Anonymous, that was a documentary I remember at the VADA group, they were not advertising, but trying to sort of recruit people who might want to join in. Was there did you have any hesitation about doing this kind of media stuff or doing the documentary?
I remember my kids were quite young and I was somewhat nervous about them just being on film saying, and they do say some pretty funny things, particularly my son.
They're really funny.
He wouldn't care now, but there's probably a stage when they're teenagers where they would think, oh, no, Dad, why did you allow that? But I think they're a part of the journey as well. And that was something that we wanted to do, my wife and I, just to be open about things and to share that. And they've been very emotionally supportive along the way. Not that I've expected them to support me, but as young adults as they are now, I think they understand the complexity of families and different constellations of them, and that sort of family that raised you versus biological family that many of us don't have contact with. And so, yeah, I'm grateful for that. Yeah, I remember Lucy and Lisa, who directed the film, and immediately felt a sense of trust that they weren't going to skewer us. I was just looking for my Janet Malcolm book here, The Journalist and the Murderer, which is just such an amazing story about how inevitably the journalist skewers you as a subject. It's such a good one. But I got the sense that we weren't going to be exploited. I guess you never really know until the final edit. But so, yeah, I felt comfortable with them that we're in good hands. And it was just great to follow all the stories. And it was genuinely moving, especially when Michael made that discovery, spoiler alert, towards the end of the film.
We don't know which discovery.
No, that's right. One of us.
Do you think that you were kind of always sort of maybe felt like you would lean into doing things like media, radio interviews and things, or was there a point in time that it shifted and you were like, yep, now I will?
Yeah, I think as someone that stayed relatively in touch with the movement for a long period of time, and a lot of men in particular just seem to have a little moment after discovery and then often just completely move away from the whole concept of being donor conceived and keep it at arm's length. Just, yeah, I felt like it's something I really needed to follow, and I was happy to speak up because I just thought there was a shortage of blokes doing that. There were so many brave women who were being vulnerable and dogged in their determination to get something to change. So I just felt it was the least that I could do. Being high in the trait of openness, it's just something that I'm pretty comfortable with doing, even if it backfires sometimes, as it inevitably does, because there are family members who aren't happy. They see that what you're doing is something private, and I do understand that perspective, but I think you have to weigh it up. And, I don't regret doing the media that I have. I mean, there's some times where you're just like, oh, but I think in the end, you've got to stick to your guns and stand by your principles. So that's what I felt I needed to do. And I don't feel, go ahead.
It's weighing up pretty complicated stuff, I suppose, isn't it? And
yeah,
it's not like you haven't considered I was calling it a something sandwich because I don't, there's a bit of a swear in there that I'll try not to do, but it's just not a great situation either way. And so I think the openness and honesty is hopefully going to be normalizing all of this. And if it's not a big deal, as everyone's saying, oh, it's not a big deal, it shouldn't be stigmatized, then why not talk about it if it's not stigmatized? If I'm following what other people are trying to teach me that it's not a big deal, then it's fine to talk about.
Yeah, it's definitely a generational shift in that idea of shame and about things that we couldn't control anyway. It seems really amiss to sort of project that onto the situation.
And I guess if people are going to go back and watch Sperm Donors Anonymous, or I've actually got a link to the VADA talk that you gave before that, I think, as well, in the timeline.
Yep.
So there's the VADA presentation that you give, and then there's Sperm Donors Anonymous. And I guess all the things that you'd found out up until that point, is there anything you could share about in the last, I guess then, decade of things you found out and how you feel about it all now?
I was pretty early on. I got my 23andMe subscription. That was the first DNA test I did. I later did Ancestry, and Ancestry's obviously sort of eclipsed the rivals in a sense, even though I did do that side one with the family tree DNA, and there's one other as well, the one from Texas or something. Yeah, it was, I mean, now 23andMe is kind of defunct. It's a little interesting thinking about where all that data will go. But if I was younger, I would have been more concerned, but I'm not so much anymore. So that was good just to see some of those distant connections genetically. But yeah, it did draw my attention to the fact that it's interesting how the side that I was interested in was the paternal side, because that's the mysterious side for me, even though it did make me question, well, why aren't I as interested in the people who I am openly related to? But I guess that's just about it having been withheld. My interest was always in trying to find half siblings if they existed. And I was able to discover quite a while later about some sort of extra information about a brother who was born a year before me at, I think it was Prince Henry's as well, where I was, and a sister who was at Royal Women's who was a little younger than him. So I know that they're out there. So that was like, wow, so interesting, because they're not on the genetic databases and they mustn't be on the voluntary register because they don't seem to know. So I'm presuming that they're out there. So I'm really hopeful about that. And then, of course, my donor's family. So he didn't want contact with me, and I respect his reasoning, as disappointing as it is. But he gave me, an A4 page of information that was able to give me insight into my background and his profession. And so, and the fact that, he has a rather unusual Slavic surname meant that I was a lot of research that I was able to do. So I've worked out who my half siblings are, even though the contact veto precludes the offspring, the extraordinary gametes, from contacting their creators. It doesn't say anything about siblings. And, about 6 months ago, I sent a message to my half siblings, so the offspring of my donor, just because I'm approaching 50 and I'm just like, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life just, who knows how long we're going to live. I just thought I'm going to send a friendly conciliatory message to them just to say, hey, I exist. It doesn't appear that either of them have checked it, but I also know that sometimes when you send messages to people on Facebook Messenger, it sort of gets funneled into this little section that it's sort of hard to check depending on your interface. I think it's easier on a laptop, but who looks at Facebook on a laptop? I don't know, probably plenty of people, but not me. So yeah, that was a risk. And I struggled with that for ages because I don't want to disrupt his world, but I also think his kids are adults as well. And I would love to know if I had a half sibling out there from an affair or from if any particular reason, I think I would just be so interested and I'd love to know who that person is. So I'm giving them the chance. And it's just, it's a risk. So I do feel fraught about that, but I just thought I've waited so long and my donor is pretty clear about not wanting any contact. So maybe his kids will. I mean, yeah. There's ethical considerations there, but I think, again, it's not illegal and it's a yearning that I have in the absence of any, facilitation of a relationship with him. So, yeah, that's one thing.
It is a huge loophole, isn't it, with the Victorian legislation that VADA or the register can reach out to only the donor and not anyone linked to the donor. And we can reach out to anyone but the donor.
Yes.
And then burst that bubble if they've never told anyone that they've donated.
It's funny, isn't it? Because it's probably based on the fear of that donor about their wife or other partner and kids that they're so hesitant. Yeah, I really don't think it would turn out that way. But yeah, I don't know. And I understand I risk another rejection through the process, and man, it would hurt on a level. I mean, I have siblings and family. It's not the end of the world, but it's just one of those things you'd like to think one day that there would be some kind of, connection, but who knows? Or of course, those other two from his donations, from my donor's donations to other families. I'd really love to meet someone, but of course, sometimes, the reverse is true, that when you are one of many tens or hundreds, Evie, that sometimes, I don't know, I mean, just as our brains are being overloaded with all the information that we have in our world, like there's a sense that we're not cut out to negotiate relationships with tens or hundreds of people. And So how does someone do that? How do you even start to
Yeah.
do you just view another sibling like, "Oh my goodness, here we go."
Yeah, it's potential room for enormous heartbreak if you care.
Yeah.
Because we're not necessarily raised to believe that we're siblings or that, you know, you go through thick and thin with your siblings, but we were never given a chance to build that experience going through thick and thin. Like, you know, if you're someone that loves to go to the footy on Sundays, what if your sibling is too? What if you could, you know, have a nice beer and a great time together and it's just a nice connection?
Mm.
And that can be it, but what's so threatening about that? I don't know, I could never understand the big threat. Even like joining the VADA meetings, I remember someone bringing up that they'd reached out to the donor and the donor was really worried they were going to come for an inheritance. And it was like so bizarre. I hadn't ever heard of that until then. And yeah, starting to get this sort of picture of how we're perceived was really disappointing.
Yeah.
Mostly. So this is on hold, I guess, for you at the moment because there's not been a seen or a red notification on this message yet.
Yeah.
So this is TBA.
Yeah, it is. And it's just recently, see, I'd seen the names through Facebook, but I hadn't actually thought about the Instagram factor, and they just came up in my suggestions for some reason. I know they're owned by the same company, but yeah. And so one of these two is very forward in sharing all of these photos of their lifestyle. And it's just like, wow, it's so interesting. And so that was some really good pictures. Yeah, really good pictures.
And did you see a likeness?
Yeah, a little bit. It's actually not as strong as I thought. And yeah, there's sort of an extra twist to that I'm sort of umming and ahhing about.
Yeah, as much as you're comfortable, doesn't have to be. Yes.
There's certainly likenesses with my donor and I. And one of his colleagues, when I was doing my original research back at Monash University, sent me pictures of a yearbook kind of situation. And there was one of my donor there in the background in a suit. So that was there was definitely a resemblance there. So you never know where the info is going to come. So
apparently at the moment now we're in sibling season, which is like the chunk of time that the DNA tests are being processed and everyone's getting their results back and their surprises. But if someone reaches out to you or you reach out to someone, that a reply could be, I understand what you're going through. Or the other one I heard was, I have information if you want it. Like, I do know something if you want information, in that kind of way. So that if the other person knows that you know, I know that you know that I know that we're DC.
Yeah.
So, because that can be the hardest thing, hoping not to drop that info. And at the moment, there aren't currently things like the in-person meetup groups like there was for VADA and RUDC. And that's, I guess, the option now is the Facebook group, the RUDC Facebook group, or before that step, it's the more open one. That's quite a secret group, the Australian Donor Conceived People's Network. Is there any resources or supports and things that you've found the most helpful over the last 10, 15, 20 years?
I think I got so much out of those support groups that really answered a lot of questions for me. And then Sarah Dingle's book or Lauren Burns' book, they were really helpful. Or Penny Mackison's book, Adoptive Experience with Many Parallels, was really helpful as well. And I think, the community is just such a great source of things. And I think that organic way that you learn when you're just learning piecemeal, because it's such an overwhelming task to sort of think about it. I think going to the group was a way of me just knowing, in 8 to 12 weeks time, there'll be another group and I'll be able to sort of delve in a little deeper into this phenomenon happened. So that was good for me, because I just couldn't try and eat the whole elephant in one gulp. It wasn't going to work. Sometimes you get a lot more information, and I know that huge things have happened to people. There's so much information they've found out in one day, and it's just sort of overwhelming. So I had the chance to slowly integrate it into my experience and my worldview, I suppose.
I remember the VADA counsellors telling me to just take it really, really slowly. That was very good. Because any siblings we have now, sort of, if they ask the question, we'd probably tell them the answer. And if they ask 5 questions in one day, they might get 5 answers
Yeah.
that they weren't expecting. Yeah. Is there anything you would want anyone to know who's just found out they're donor conceived? Is there like a message you would give them from all of your wisdom of all of these years?
Wisdom, no pressure. I think it's talking to people so important. Generally, women seem to be more apt at that. And I just especially encourage the blokes that seem, in my experience, quite reticent to talk, that it's not a slight on you, something that someone's made a decision about before you were even born. It's something to explore, and it influences you in ways sometimes that maybe you don't realize. And I think sitting with that uncomfortableness is really important. And you experience that sometimes. I mean, it was maybe easier for me to start searching for my biological father because my father who raised me passed away. And so it kind of made it simpler. I didn't feel the divided loyalties that I know that some donor conceived people do. So I think just being comfortable with the questions and the discomfort and just seeking that community is really important. Because you eventually, I mean, you're not always going to find the answers maybe you were looking for, but in the process, you start to feel a sense of peace about it. And yeah, I don't know, like how much of a do I constantly think of myself as a donor conceived person? I mean, I'm just a person. We all come about in some way or other, but yeah, it's certainly worth interrogating if you want to make peace with it. And when you have multiple sources of family, it does complicate life. So it's something you really want to think about and think about its legacy.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ross. I feel like, yeah, we've spoken for a while and got a lot of insight from you. And I personally have really appreciated being able to see you and your journey and everything you've shared really openly since I met you. It's been really encouraging to see someone sharing so much and so openly, because that kind of allowed me to as well. And how other people have handled such complex things and complex emotions and weighing up things and, you know, weighing up privacy and being so careful and all that kind of stuff too. So I really appreciate it. And I hope that your sibling wants to get to know you, because I think you're pretty awesome. So I guess we'll see. That who knows if this would pop up maybe in their algorithm.
Wouldn't that be the darndest? No, I appreciate the work that you're doing to reach different subsets of people and different media forms, because yeah, I'm a bit of a dinosaur now with that kind of stuff, but it's great when I do see your shorts or threads or whatever they're called these days. Yeah, they're really catchy and impactful, so I love the work you're doing.
Oh, nice.
Thanks,
Thank
Evie.
you. Thank you to Ross for sharing his experiences with us and documenting where he's currently up to in his journey. Ross's story and discoveries remind me that there are more ways to discover or connect with siblings or family members. Once we have a name or a surname, we might see those names appear in unexpected places and be faced with a what to do next or how to proceed. There always seems to be a complex yet delicate situation when we reach each step of finding family members or information. One thing that does still seem to be true is that joining in with a community of people who really get it can be so helpful to navigate it all. I've put any of the resources we mentioned in this episode into the description so that you can find any of those, especially the documentary Sperm Donors Anonymous and Ross's excellent moustache of that time, if you want to see it. If you're enjoying these episodes, please rate them, give them a like or share them with a friend. Any support you can give means that someone who might need these resources has a chance to see them and find the information and answers they're looking for and the help they might need. You never know if you might be listening to someone's story that you're related to. Or perhaps a loved one of yours finds out they too are in need of these stories or resources. I've benefited from donor conceived people in my community who have searched for answers, shared information and pushed for change. I thank all of them for doing what they could so that I have the information that I do and felt support when I needed it.